Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is a very long video, so giving you a warning. I'm going to show you, well, these are the ink towers that I've made, and they're varying sizes. This is the finished ink tower that I ended up putting my Catherine Puller inks into. There's a side view, and I just used some pattern paper. There's the back view. I've got it up on a Lazy Susan, by the way. There's another front view. And here it is empty. And the reason I put my Catherine Puller inks in there instead of my Simon Hurley is because I have my Simon Hurley inks labeled on the long end or the short end. And so they hang out too far and I don't want them to fall out. So it fits my Catherine Puller inks just perfectly. So I go take you step by step what I did to create this tower, and hopefully you'll be able to create one of your own. So here it is a little bit closer up. You can see that I didn't finish the bottom edges, the inside. It doesn't matter, it's not important. But you'll see here that my Catherine Puller inks fit in here perfectly. And I'm gonna just go ahead and slide them all in here, so you can see what it looks like when it's full of ink. And not only do the Catherine Pullers fit in there, but some of my others do as well, because I don't actually have enough of the big size ones to fill it up. I have, mostly I collect the minis, but the more that I use it, the more that I will be purchasing the full-size pads and the re-inkers, because this is some awesome ink right here. I'm going to tell you that right now. I know you've seen me use it before. So I again apologize for the very long length of the video, but I wanted to make sure that I showed you every step and how I did this. And it just takes a long time. So see there, I'm fitting a couple of different inks in the bottom, my Delicata inks. That's the ink tower. And without any further ado, we'll go ahead and we're going to get started here. Starting off, I like to use my large silicone mat when I'm using my cutting mat. And the reason why is because it clings onto my cutting mat really well. And that makes me happy. Because I'm, doing a lot of cutting of chipboard and it slippy slides around. Now, the only thing I don't like is if I ink on my cutting mat, the ink doesn't really come off very well. It kind of sticks in the little grooves and stuff. And this is a very old and loved cutting mat. So just get her cleaned off there. And then I'm going to grab my Simon Hurley inks, a couple of them, and start taking some measurements. And then this is how you're going to get a custom size. I've just grabbed one of the new ones, a shooting star here, and I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to take my ruler if I can find my ruler. Where are you? There you are. And I want to measure the width of the ink pad. So it looks like I'm going to need about 4 inches. And then I'm going to need about 2 3/4, 2.5. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of just write this down here so you can see it. 4 by 3 by 1. What? I don't know why I got that measurement. Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry. Okay, so that's a 12-inch piece of chipboard. This is medium weight chipboard. And I'm going to go ahead and just see how many I can fit. So I can't fit 3, so I'm going to have to do it 2. And so I'll do, I'll need to have a little bit of leeway on the chipboard there because I'll have pieces in between. And, I don't want these to fit so tight that they're, hurting. So it looks like I'm going to go about 8 1/4. And so I'm going to trim off so that my 12-inch piece becomes 8 1/4. And that's going to become my back. Again, I have no idea why I wrote down 1 inch. Maybe it'll be revealed later. I don't know. But I like to just lay it on my cutting mat, and then I have a quilting ruler that I like to use, just because it gives me more to hold on to keep from slipping away. And I will go ahead and just line that up, and I line it up on the long side, and I do line it up at the bottom too to make sure I'm square, or rectangle in this case. And then I'm going to go ahead and just start cutting, and it's several small swipes. You don't want to try and just swipe it in one time and get a cut, because everything will slip. Trust me on that one. You just do several small, and I'll keep that scrap. So I know that I want this to be 12 inches tall by 8 1/4 wide. And there's my back piece. Now I need to do my side pieces. They also need to be 12 inches. And I also will need to make a divider. So, looks like it'll hold, well, won't fit 30 ink pads. That's how many there are, how many Simon Hurleys I have. It's only going to fit 24. Okay, so, you know, I'll come up with another solution. Maybe I'll make an extension on it, but for now, I'm just going to leave it so it will fit 24 ink pads. See, I would need another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think about doing an extension, and you can do it, but I really don't. I prefer to do it as a separate unit and glue them together, because when you try and, you know, have a foundation piece that's split apart, it just doesn't work out very well. So we'll stick with what we've got here. And then the side pieces are going to go to the outside part of the chipboard, so that's why I didn't take into account more than 1/4 inch. If you were going to put them on the inside, then you need to take into account about 1/16 inch. And these are my tapes that I use. One of them is from scrapbook.com, and it's not labeled. I think it's when they first came out with it. And then the other one is from Elizabeth Craft. But what I want to do is I'm going to cover this back piece with paper. So I'm going to roll out my tape. And then I'm just going to lay my piece of chipboard down on the tape, because I want it to go pretty much to the edges. It's okay if it hangs over a little bit, because I can trim that off. And then I just take my knife and I trim off my tape from here. And then I'll trim off the excess from the other sides. And I save those little excess pieces. Some. It depends on how small they are. But sometimes you get a big chunk of excess, and, you know, there's no point in wasting that. So I've got one piece here. Now I need to do another. And I don't think I'd like to try to mess with a whole 12-inch piece. It's already kind of hard to mess with this size. But I'm going to go ahead and kind of try and lay that on there so it's even with the, so it butts up against the other piece. And it's okay if it overlaps a little bit. I'm just going to trim off that excess. I'm going to flip it over, check my fit. Yep, that's fine. I don't mind. And I can use a piece of 2-inch tape for that last part. Or I can lay it on and just save the scraps. It's either or. You could do this with glue, but I'm not real crazy about gluing down a very large piece of paper. Especially if I'm going to add any paint or any kind of wetness, because it'll bubble up on you. So I just prefer tape for this. There are other parts that I use glue. I just prefer glue because it's more of a precise type cut. And it's okay if there's that little bit of space in there. Doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and grab my, what am I grabbing here? I should have, sorry about that, I should have voiced over this thing. Oh, I'm looking for a paper pad that I want to use, and I have one here that is partially used, of course, and there are parts of it that I'll use and parts of a different one. But I'm going to use this pretty stuff for this particular, and I'm working right now with the inside of the box. So a lot of it isn't even going to show, but I don't care. I love this piece right here. I'm going to put this piece on there. I'm just going to set my paper pad aside, and I'm going to peel off my tape now. So I use a knife to grab the edge. I want to burnish it down first to make sure that that glue from the tape is nice and stuck. So that way when I go to pull the backing off, I don't pull up the tape as well. Let me get that piece out of the way there. And I just take my little knife and I kind of get it up under there and then pull that backing off. And the big backing pieces are worth saving because they're, you know, they're basically non-stick, so you can use them like gluing other things together or putting your scraps back on. And I'm going to pull this up, and I'm just going to let that little flap fall. It's fine. And then I'm going to grab the 2-inch piece backing off. Just like that. Now I've got a really, really sticky board. I'm going to carefully pick it up, and I'm going to lay my paper down, face down, and I'm going to lay my board on the paper. Try and get the ends even. And just rub down on it. Then I can take my knife and just trim off the excess. And there's no better way to do this than with the knife. I'll tell you that right now. But you do not want any excess paper hanging over because it'll impede any of your folds. So I've got just this tiny bit, but I really don't want that on there because it'll be a problem even though it's a small amount. So there's my back. I'm going to just take my bone folder and burnish it down, make sure it's good and stuck. See, there's my measurement there. I have no idea why I measured. Oh, okay, so 1 inch would be the depth. Okay, now I get it. And even though it is deeper, I mean, it's not as deep as 1 inch, it's nice to have a little bit of space in there. So besides that, I'm going to be dividing, and what I'm looking at now is the width because I want my pieces to be a little bit less, so so that the little parts of the ink pad stick out. So I've got my piece of scrap here that I was working with, because I do use up my scraps. And I'm going to go 2 inches. No, I'm going to cut 2 at 1, 2, looks like at 3 1/4. 2 of them at 3 inches. That's a 3-inch piece. Okay. I'm just going to trim off the excess on this one. And you see, you need to make several passes. And it even still went crooked on me, but it's okay. It's not a huge deal. It's better if it doesn't do that, but if it does, it does. Chipboard's not that cheap, so I'm saving it. And what I'm doing here is I'm measuring out 2 3/4 and just making a mark there. And I will cut that with my big scissors and set it aside. I don't know why. Okay, see, what I'm doing is I'm checking the measurement of the ink pad. So it looks like when the ink pad, because it's a little bit, it's a little bit rounded there on the edge, looks like the ink pad will stick out just a little bit, enough to get your fingers under. But not quite. I need it to be just a little bit smaller, so let's go 2 1/2. And I'll just mark that and cut it with my scissors. And it's just kind of my test measurement, because measure twice, cut once. There we go. I like that. I think that's good. 2.5 is good. So what I'm doing is I want to cut my pieces. These are my side pieces. They're going to be 3 inches. So I'm going to cut my other 3-inch side piece. I have to grab a full piece of chipboard there because that was my scrap. And then I'll go ahead and lay my ruler down there. The only thing I don't like about this ruler is it doesn't give measurements from the bottom, you know, along the bottom edge, so I have to count. But that's okay. It's mainly just meant to get, you know, I want to make sure it's nice and square. You want to make sure you have a nice sharp knife when you're doing this, and you see I kind of went off a little, and that's okay. It's not a problem, because all of this is going to get covered by paper. So I've got my 2 pieces, and I want to make sure that I don't mix them up, so I'm marking them. Because I've done that before, I've accidentally put an outside in the middle. And I'll be covering those with paper as well. And I'm going to grab my 2-inch tape, I think. Nah, I'm going to go ahead and grab my, this is a, I want to say this is a 5-inch tape, 4.5 or 5. And I mean, this stuff has sat around for years. I haven't touched it. Never even thought about using it. So I'm glad I'm able to put it to use here. And then I'm just going to lay both pieces on there so I don't have too much waste. And just trim that tape off. And then I'll just take my knife and run it down the center there. And then I'll go ahead and slice off the excess tape from the one piece. Now I still need to add tape to another piece. And this stuff can get sticky, sticky, sticky. It's a mess. So I'm just thinking, can I put my 2-inch tape there? Will it work? Yeah, there we go. It's only going to leave a tiny little space. I'm okay with that. And sometimes I just rip. You can do that. It just depends on the surface that you're tearing against, and the chipboard is sturdy enough to handle the rip. So now I need to get more paper here. And so I'm going to thumb through here and grab another solid, well, none of them are solid, but you know what I mean. Grab another piece that is completely covered, and I think I'll grab this orange piece here. I love this paper, I do, but I can't just hoard it. I need to actually use it. Oh boy. So I'm going to go ahead and just peel the backing off of these, and I'm going to stick them down side by side onto this orange piece. Get stuff out of my way, because as soon as you've got anything impeding you with glue, life isn't fun anymore. So I'm going to lay that as close as I possibly can to the edge. Push it down, and then I'll do the second piece right next to it. There we go. Sometimes it's a fight getting those things off. And I'm going to give a little bit of space on this one, just because the cut isn't perfectly straight. And I don't want to have no paper in certain areas. So I'll go ahead and trim this piece away. Flip it over and trim off the excess paper, which I will be using. There we go. And then trim the excess off of this one. Very little waste. And there we have our side pieces. And these, the color paper is going on the inside. I'll go ahead and trim any excess off the edges as well. It's okay if there's a little bit showing. You don't really want it to, but you gotta have a really steady hand to get that on there perfectly. Yeah. And you can practice, but the paper's 12 inches and so are the pieces. So I'm marking them again so I don't mix them up with my center divider. And I'll go ahead and just use my bone folder and burnish that down. If there's any excess glue hanging over, tape hanging over, I'll just push it down. So it's going to come together like that. And then we'll have our center piece. So these measured, it looks like 2 3/4. No, they were 2 1/2. So I need to cut my center piece, and I make that just a little bit narrower. So I'm going to grab my ruler here. I'm going to trim that down to 1, 2, okay. I don't know. I'm sure I'm going to write it down for you. It almost looks like I'm doing 3 inches. Okay. 1, 2, 2.5. That's 2.5 inches. And I think I have my measurements written down here somewhere. I will put them in the description box. So this one is going to get covered differently. It's going to have some flaps and stuff on it. So I'm going to have to get out my paper trimmer. Now I'm going to use this one because it trims and scores. I fight with it a lot. It's the thing I don't like about these is that they're so huge. They just take up a lot of space. I'm going to just move this cutting mat for now because I want that to sit sturdy so my cuts are sturdy and it doesn't move on me when I'm trying to score. So I've flipped that side up, so that's going to be my cutting. So, well, you're supposed to be able to flip it over, but it doesn't want to come apart right now. So that's fine. That's going to be my cutting side. And I am going to cut this piece down to 1 3/4. I'm going to cut 3 of them. I'm going to need 3 for the middle, for the center piece. I'm going to need 2 for the flap and 1 to cover the top. So 3 of them at 1 3/4. Then I'm going to flip that part down and I'm going to score them at 7/8 of an inch. Looking for my little scoring knife. I don't like to use my big bone folder for scoring because it's so big and it's really slick. So just find the 7/8 mark and score it. And I'm not going to do a real deep score because I don't want to tear my paper. And there are a couple of instances where I do end up tearing my paper. So 7/8. And one more at 7/8. So basically in half. Get this thing out of my way. And I've got my pieces here. Now I'm going to fold one this way so that the mountain is on the outside. I'm going to fold the other two so the mountain is on the inside. And just burnish them down. And they don't have to be perfect either. They're basically just, they're meant to hold the paper, the centerpiece down to the backing, just like that. So what I'm going to do here is now you can just take one piece and fold it over the top, but I don't want to do it that way. I'm going to do it a different way. So first I'm going to glue these pieces on, and these are the flaps. And for this I do like to use glue, but I am going to miter them down just a wee bit here so that they're not, so nothing impedes the other portions of the blocks. And you want to, when you're doing the miters, you want to keep them real small and make sure they come up all the way up to the edge. That mountain piece I don't need to miter because it's going across the top, so it needs to cover the whole thing. Okay, I'll go ahead and get some glue on here. And you know, I'll tell you one tip. Keep your glue bottle full. Use a small glue bottle and fill it up. If it gets low and you're finding you have to shake it or push real hard to squeeze it, you're going to have some sore hands when you're done with this. So refill your glue bottle often. And I am using my Reptile adhesive. It is tried and true. I 100% trust it. And I don't use anything else, honestly, you know, except for tape and stuff like that. But as far as glue goes, I use this glue for everything. See, this way I don't have to fight too hard to get my glue out. It just flows nicely. Just glue the whole entire edge. And the folded side is going to line up with the bottom of the piece of chipboard. And I'll use my bone folder and just kind of push it up against before I start burnishing it down to make sure that it's nice and even. Then I fold it out and use my bone folder to burnish it out. And I got something stuck underneath there. I can't get it out, so I'm just going to ignore it. It's fine. It's going to get covered with paper anyway. I'm going to flip it over and repeat the same on the other side. So I decided I would speed this up some because it gets kind of tedious watching people put glue on. So here's me just doing the other side. Making sure it's nice and even. Then I'll just grab my bone folder and smooth it down. And then I'm going to be doing the top part. See, now it'll stand up nicely. And the top part is just going to get glued down to the top part. You know, using that center line as a kind of a guide to get it even on both sides. And a way I like to do it is I like to start with one side, lay my chipboard down and burnish it down really well. And then I like to take and just kind of coax it up and fold it over like that so I've got a nice smooth edge, and then take my bone folder and flatten that edge down. more glue on, fold it over again, give it a smooth, and then take my bone folder and burnish it down really good. Make sure it's good and stuck down. So now all I need to do is have a couple of strips for that center piece. And looks like I've already cut these. Nope. I'm going to use this one here. Let's see if I have enough here. Let me grab my cutter again, my big old cutting board. Okay, get this opened out again. Flip it open. And I am going to cut this down. Looks like, oh yeah, I'm making the strips here. So these are 1 3/4. And I'm going to need 4 of them. And you notice I'm using different color paper. It doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and flip my little guard down and score these all at 7/8 as well. And I'm just manually kind of folding them in a little bit to make sure I get them going the right way. So 2 of them are going to be mountain folds and 2 of them are going to be valley folds. Get that out of my way. Go ahead and burnish these down. Okay, I've got those done. Now what I need to do here is I'm going to move this piece of silicone now. And I'm going to go ahead and get my cutting board back out because I forgot to cut some. And what I need to cut here, and I'm looking for another piece of paper, looking through my paper pad, because I'll need multiple more pieces of paper, obviously. There's my paper pad. I don't know where, I bury stuff when I'm working. So I'm going to grab one of these pieces that basically it's not covered all the way with the pattern. And I'm cutting those down to the same 1 3/4. Because I need a couple more, and I'm going to score these again at 7/8. Get that out of the way. Fold and burnish those. Those are going to be, see, I got that, my cut a little bit deep, and it's got a little bit of a tear in it, but I'll live with it. It's going to be covered up anyway. So I've got my back piece, and I've got my side pieces here. And what I need to do is I need to cover the top of the side piece with one of the mountain folds. And I'm going to do that the same way you see me do it, same way I just did the last one. Just lay my glue on, lay the piece down, make sure that it's lined up, flip it over, burnish it down. Fold it to get that fold line. Smooth out the edge. Place my glue on. Flip it over so I get it nice and flat, and burnish that down. So we still have, that's the outside piece, and what I need is I need the I need it to still glue in into the valley part, but the valley part is the colored part in this case. And it doesn't really matter because these pieces aren't going to show except for this part right here. So you can see I've got the white side up, but that's going to be covered with the back. And if there's any excess, trim it off. You don't want any excess. And what that's going to do is it's going to create that little place for me to glue the back down to. And I get glue all the way to the edge. And I like to hold it like at a 45-degree or a 90-degree angle, sorry, and then lay down the back piece so that it's nice and straight. And then I'm going to take one of these mountain folds, and it should be a valley fold. That's my bad, because that's going to go and support the inside. So I'm going to glue down one side, make sure it goes all the way to the edge. Take my bone folder and use it to kind of push it up against the edge of the piece I'm going to be gluing it onto. And then I'll lay my glue onto that spare flap, hold my page up, flip it over, and burnish it down. And there I've got a nice sturdy corner, and so I'm just going to do the same on the other side. And there we go. We have our two sides. Now we just need to do our center. And what I'm going to do is, I like this ruler because you can find the center. So I know that it's 8 1/4, so I need to find 4 1/8 to lay that piece down in the center. And so I'm just going to make a little mark. Do the same on the other side. 4 1/8. And it looks like I've got a little excess paper there. I don't want any excess paper hanging over at all. Otherwise it won't sit properly. And so I'm going to go ahead and just glue this down. So you're going to put glue onto the chipboard and on both flaps. Want to use plenty of glue. I'm just going to find that line, line it up. As soon as I know it's lined up, I'm going to go ahead and burnish with my hands first because I don't want to move anything. And then I'll burnish that down with my bone folder. I'm still being bothered by that one little piece. But that's okay. Now we've got we've got the basic structure. Now we have to do is build the shelves. So now that I've got this structure here, I'm going to go ahead and figure out how big my insides need to be here. So I'm going to measure, and basically you can just take a piece, cut it, and check the fit. But it should be about 4 by 2 1/4, I want to say. See, I'm going to make a mark. And I'm marking just a little bit above 4, about 4 1/8. I'm going to cut it. And this again is just a scrap piece I use as a test piece to see if it'll fit, because I know that, there's a little bit of wiggle room, so I'm going to trim that down a little bit. So now we're just going a 4 inches plus. I think my husband calls it plus, or 4 inches something. I don't know. So I've got that. It's going to be 4 by 2 1/2. See, that's still kind of measuring to just like 4 1/16 maybe. If it's not quite long enough, that's okay. But if it's too long, then you get bowing. Okay, wait a second. A little less than 4 1/2. Just a hair. Not 4 1/2. I don't know why I said 4 1/2, because that is 4. Sorry about that. Oh gosh, I'm getting rummy there. So what I'm going to do here is, of course, I'm going to have to get out some more chipboard. So what I've done is I've got this big swing line chopper, and I'm cutting my pieces down to the size that I need. So looks like I'm doing 2 1/2. 2.5. I can't see my measurement. Okay, yeah, 4 1/8 by 2.5. I need 20. Actually, I only need 22 of them, but my brain thinks I need 24, so we're doing 24. And yeah, so I cut out those all, ahead of time for you. And, I'll still check fit even afterwards, but they do need to be all the same size. And the next thing we have to do is we have to go and cover all of these. So the way that I'm going to cover these is, first of all, you've got to make a lot of little flaps, and I'll show you what I mean. So want to make 24 of them at 3.5 by 4 1/8. That's going to be the top. I'm going to make 24. No, wait a minute. So 2.5 by 1 3/4. That's going to be the short side. I need 96 of them. And 4 1/8 by 1 3/4. I'm going to need 48. So I'm using, that's just scrap paper that I'm using for the 96 of them, or 48 scrap and 48 craft. And the reason for that is there's some of the pieces are just the flap sides, and I'm going to be coloring them anyway. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just do the first one. So I've got some Recollections paper that I'm calling scrap. It's not my favorite paper, but I will go through the pad and select some that kind of go with the color scheme that I'm working with, which is, basically oranges and peaches and stuff like that. So I'll grab a couple of those. And here's another one that kind of goes, so I'll grab those. I'm gonna need quite a lot here. We'll go ahead and grab the orange one. Now 5 should be good for now. If I need more, I'll grab more. And just because I pull them out doesn't mean I have to use them. So I just want to make sure I have plenty. And I'll be using my guillotine trimmer to trim these so that I can easily trim them in my regular trimmer. So I'm going to trim them down to basically 8.5 on one side, because you can't, in your regular paper trimmer, it won't do a 12-inch piece of paper, no way, no how. But you can do several at one time. And don't you worry, I'm going to be using those scraps. But if I do 8.5, that means I'm going to get at least 4 1/4, right? So now I'll take my regular paper trimmer and start trimming down first basically the cover piece, the top cover. And I'm just trimming that down, basically cutting this piece in half, almost. Yep. So now I've got 2, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest. Okay, so got those done. Check. Next, I'm using these scraps to cut down the pieces that are going to become the flat pieces. So those are going to be 1 1/4, same width. And I'm going to cut all those. Okay, I'm going to cut 48 with the Accent Opaque because it is a thicker paper and it's going to be my bottom support pieces. So I'm going to cut those also at 1 1/4 and score them at 7/8 all the way down the line. And it's better to have kind of just the bottom part be thicker. And I will use some ink, not ink, but oxide most likely, to cover the whiteness of it. I'll go ahead and complete cutting those down. Make sure they don't, for some reason in my mind, they don't look the same, but they're fine. They're all the same. There's one that's a little bit too big. That one came to 2 inches, so there we go. And those are all going to get cut down. I don't know what I am doing. Oh, strips. I'm cutting those into strips. Okay. So the one piece makes 6 strips, and then I need them to be 2 1/4, did I say? So I'm going to cut all those down. And this is the most tedious process, is just cutting down all these little pieces of paper. But I've got 18 per sheet I can get, so I'm going to need 3 sheets of paper. Okay, so I'm going to get out my little silicone mat now, and I've got all my components ready here, all kind of sitting in a line. And what I haven't done yet is I haven't scored them. So I score them as I go because I want them to stay in a neat stack. Pardon me, a neat stack. And so they're all going to be scored at 7/8. So I'm going to score the ones I need for my first little piece I need to cover. So the pretty side goes in. And those are going to go like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and take and put the two together and miter them together at the same time, just to save time. And then my end pieces, I'm going to need 4 of them. Well, I guess you'd call these the side pieces. I'm going to go ahead and miter those down. Oh, no, I don't. I need 2 because the bottom side is going to be the white. And see, this is much heavier paper, so it's sturdier. And fold those down. So I do need 4, but I need 2 of the pattern and I need 2 of the Accent Opaque. And go ahead and just miter those down. And if any hangs over, you of course have to trim it off. So I'm going to take my first piece of chipboard and I'm going to start with the bottom sides. And I'm placing glue and placing the fold out towards the outside, just like all of the others you've seen me do. Make sure that that's nice and even. If any hangs over, again, trim it off. Needs to be trimmed off. So I know that I cut my pieces of paper a little bit too big on that particular one. And go ahead and glue down the other side. There we go. Burnish it down. Make sure that's nice and stuck. And then I'm going to do the back flaps. So I like to do the side flaps first and then the back. I'm going to grab some ink and I'm going to go ahead and use ink, and I'm going to use Kish Flamingo. And I'm just going to color these. Now this is the bottom side, so it's not really going to show much, but still, you know, I want it colored. So then I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to do this piece right here, which is the flap, the other side of the flap, because you're going to need one on each side so that it flies like a little birdie. And I just trim that one down a little bit. And again, I mean, you're doing a lot of these, so it's a long process, but I mean, it's a project that you could probably put like in a tote and, you know, do it when you have time. I sat down and did this whole thing in one sitting, and so I was tired afterwards. And it was the second one I did in a couple of weeks because I did one before and the video was such a mess I took it down. So I'm putting this back flap on now. Flip it over, put this back flap on. And this will just be the same process over and over again. Again, you can use tape for this. I prefer glue because it gives me room to move things around if I need to. So I know this is the top side, so I'm going to lay my piece of paper down. I'm going to make sure it's not too big. I may need to trim a little bit off because I don't want anything getting in the way of the folds. And I'm going to lay down glue. And I'm going to glue it all the way to the edge, making sure I'm not impeding folds. And then burnish it down. And then I'm going to do my same little fold trick and fold it down, flatten that edge down on the edge there. Fold it over and burnish it down. And there I've got one done. Now I'll go ahead and do the rest, obviously off camera. And any excess that might be hanging over, trim it off. We want to make sure nothing's in the way of those folds, that everything can go to a complete 90-degree angle. All right, now let me get some more done. So I've got most of them done. I did want to show you what to do if you wanted to use tape, just for good measure, right? So all is the same process here, all of the folding, etc., burnishing, everything else. Just 2 of the long, 2 of the pattern short, 2 of the Accent Opaque or your thick, heavy paper. On my other one, I used some heavy craft. Get this out of the way because I'm going to be dealing with tape. So I'm getting my little cutting board out because I'll be having to trim because I don't have any tape that is 7/8 of an inch. My tape's only an inch. So you have to trim off. Anyway, that's what you would do if you were going to tape it. So I've got all my pieces taped. And now what I've done here is I've made a little kind of a jig sort of thing. And I'm going to use my little miniature Fisker's trimmer to trim those, miter those edges. Because they've got tape on them, it just makes them a little bit neater. And the tape makes the paper pretty heavy. So you're just going to go through and slice off all those corners. So I'm lining up the bottom of the paper with the edge of the tape. And that's why it's down so far in my cutter, because I need to be able to fit the long pieces in. And yeah, trimmers, sometimes they can be temperamental. And I'm just going to throw away all those excess pieces. And you're just going to do the same process. You just take the tape off, but you just have to kind of pick your piece up and kind of hold it. And don't press down until you've got it nice and even. There we go. And it's basically the same way all the way. Okay, I've got all my pieces ready to rock and roll. Now, time to clean up here and start to assemble the inside part of our ink tower. And we'll check for fit here. I want to make sure that nothing bows out. I do see that it's just a little bit shy, but that's okay. But I want to start from the bottom, and I'm going to glue this in 1 inch from the bottom. And then the rest are basically kind of eyeballed. The little flaps help guide you where to glue it, believe it or not. So I put glue on all of the flaps, and your fingers will get gluey during this process because you're going to pull some flaps in while you try and lay that in so that you don't get glue all down the sides. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm just going to lay it 1 inch in, and then I'm going to grab this and place it and then burnish down all those flaps. Get them all nice and tight. And check to make sure it's going to stand. Make sure the flaps are all well burnished down. There we've got our first shelf in. Now the second shelf is easy because we just basically use the line of the other shelf to line it up. Same thing, just a lot of glue. And I feel like glue is stronger than tape in a lot of instances. I mean, your red line tape is pretty strong, but boy, it's a hassle to work with. No, thank you. If I can't tear my tape, I'm not happy. I'm just going to lay this in here. I'm still going to check for my inch there. Make sure I basically take my ruler and check the inch at the top, on the sides as well. And that way, you know, you've got a good judge of level is what I'm looking for. I mean, if you had a tiny level, you could probably make sure it was level, but it's not crucial. It is, you know, it's important that it's not, you know, laying crazy, but it's not crucial that it's perfectly level. But you see, as I lay this in here, that it goes perfectly. The bottom flaps basically touch. So let's go ahead and get some more in here. Okay. I'm just checking kind of for evenness there. Looks fine to me. So I'm going to go ahead and lay the next one down. Glue the next one down. Now I'm not making marks or anything like that, because as I said, as long as you've got your flaps on there pretty good, then the flaps kind of measure for you. So I'm going to lay this in and I'm going to check the bottom flap, and I'll see that it's up against basically the last flap and the top of the shelf, and we'll go ahead and burnish that down. It goes pretty quickly, and then I use my bone folder just to burnish that way. Any excess glue, you know, you definitely want to wipe that off, especially if you're going to do any inking, because it kind of, you know, the glue resists inks. And now you can see why I didn't bother covering the insides of the side, and I really didn't need to do the insides at all because all these flaps cover it. So that's a step you can skip if you want to. Haha, yay! You basically don't even have to cover the back. But I didn't want anything peeking through, so just in case. And you know, you've got the top and bottom that don't have any flat, or the top that doesn't have any flaps that cover it completely. There we are, just making sure that those two are kind of in line with each other. And burnish that thing down. And we'll go ahead and complete getting almost all the shelves in until I get to the very last, because I'm going to go upside down with the last. So I flipped my box over because this is the top shelf, and I want to make sure I get it correctly in here. And it's just easier than trying to reach over. I'm going to glue that one down. There we go. Now you can see what I mean about how your fingers are going to get sore if you don't keep your glue bottle full. And flip those in, set it down, make sure those are touching down at the bottom. That way you get a better view of what I mean when I say the flaps are touching. They're touching the top of the last piece. Okay, one more, and we're done putting our shelves in. What kind of carpenters are we? Now you can do this with just covered chipboard without the flaps, but I want the strength. I don't care if there's paper showing, you know, you can see how there's edges of the paper showing. If you do that with straight chipboard, then your cuts better be perfect. Otherwise, your shelves are going to fall and lean and be out of balance, so we don't like that. There we go. Get that burnished down really well. Perfect. Now we still need to cover the back and sides. But see, those fit perfectly that way, but my labels are someplace not in the right spot. So I'll make a custom one for these. And then I should be able to make one that'll fit 30 of them across a 12-inch piece of chipboard. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut the top. So I'm measuring from edge to edge, okay, because I need it to go overhang a little bit. So I've got them at 3 1/4 by 9. And for the top and bottom pieces, I'm cutting 2 each. And then I'm going to tape them together so that I have a little bit of a sturdier top and bottom here. And I don't know why I'm getting my paper out, because I need to glue those together first. And yep. So I'm trimming my paper anyway. I'm gonna do 4 by 9 3/4. So I completely skipped the part of covering the top piece, but so what I'm doing here is I'm getting glue down onto the surface here of the chipboard, and then I'm going to glue down the top, which I've already covered, and somehow skipped the whole part of covering it. And I do flip it over so that I can get, you know, the overhang even on all edges, and I can put pressure and weight on it. So here what you see me doing is basically sealing the top part with the glue, with just a bead of glue, the best bead I can get anyway. Because it was uneven, because I made the top and then I did it wrong and tore it off, so people do that. Anyway, that's it. That's how you do this, and there's a million videos on how to cover a piece of chipboard, and then I covered it with paper, and we're done. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one.